name is Sara Zanni, and together with Irene Ciambezi, I coordinated the Right Way project on behalf of community Hope John 23, APG 23 in brief. A project co-funded by the European Union, the AMIF program, and we coordinate this project together with 7 Italian partners and the ICMC, the International Migration Catholic Commission. We are very pleased to share with you this evening the main findings of the project, in particular of the pilot model for the integration of survivors of trafficking. In 2 years, with the help of our partners that are Fondazione Caritas Trieste, Progetto Comunità Sud, Associazione Farsi Prossimo, Associazione Diaconia Vicenza, Fondazione Caritas Senigallia e Fondazione Caritas Pescara. We have supported 50 Nigerian women survivors of trafficking in an integration pathway in these 7 different Italian cities. And we involved more than 80 people among tutors, teachers, staff from trade unions and company as stakeholders in this integration pathway. Furthermore, we've make a lot of awareness raising events in our local communities involving more than 400 people. And we have a special activity in the school with the students involving more than 1,000 students to make aware of the trafficking for sexual exploitation. So thank you very much to be with us this evening. Petra Weck from ICMC Belgium will help us moderating this meeting. Special thank to Petra and to ICMC, our colleague Abigail, that support us a lot in the research activities of this project in finding and collecting best practices from also other European countries, because we really believe that only sharing our practice, our knowledge, we can improve ourselves and the work of our association in support of these women. So thank you, Petra, very much.
Yes, now the video is on. Yes, Sarah, thank you very much. Welcome to everyone. I am very happy that although it was unfortunately not possible to meet in person, which would of course have been much nicer, but because of COVID, of course, again, we have to meet at Zoom. Welcome to everyone. So I hope that we have some very fruitful discussions. Just for housekeeping order, just a little things. The questions will be via the chat, so the participants are all muted. And we only will show the panelists that are actually speaking, so that you can really fully concentrate on their interventions. Let's start with the panelists, since we have a very full program. I am extremely happy that we will be first introducing our keynote speaker. It's Mr. Valiant Richey from he's the special representative and coordinator for combating trafficking in human beings at the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, the OSCE. Mr. Richey represents the OSCE at the political level on anti-trafficking issues and assists the 57 OSCE participating states in the development and implementing of anti-trafficking strategies and initiatives. We are very honored that Mr. Richey will speak about the impact of COVID-19 on the victims of human trafficking, who are being increasingly vulnerable due to limited mobility, closing borders, and reduced access to services. Mr. Richey, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Petra, and it's a pleasure to be joining you today for such an important discussion. I'm really delighted to be here, and it's my pleasure to join you in this meeting on the Right Way project. I'm looking forward to hearing more about it in just a few moments. Let me just say that I think the focus of the project, namely on integration of victims of trafficking, is such an important topic, and I really commend you and all the colleagues who've worked on this for discussing it, for working on it, but also discussing it right now, because in light of COVID, the event that has really defined this year more than any other, it's particularly important to be working with survivors. In the context of today's discussion, I wanted to focus a little bit on COVID for a moment, because I think it's hard to kind of overstate the impact that it's had on this topic of human trafficking. Although the threat is universal, I think everyone is experiencing impacts of it. Time and time again, we see that the negative consequences of the crisis will be disproportionately borne by the most vulnerable in our societies, as so often happens, and this includes, of course, victims of trafficking. And this is really why your work in this project is so particularly important, because the people who are going to be impacted by COVID really need the support that you are working on developing. And how it plays out is like this: with the movement restrictions and the interruption of numerous economic activities, traffickers are really seeking to maintain their revenue through expanded and other forms of exploitation. And trafficking for sexual exploitation is increasingly moving online, as we know, where traffickers can keep their revenue intact and really enhance the isolation and control over victims, particularly women and girls. Likewise, vulnerable persons who are already living in precarious circumstances are now further facing economic deprivation and consequently higher risks of being swept into exploitative situations. At the same time that the risks are increasing for victims of trafficking, unfortunately, the support is decreasing. And what I mean by that is that access to shelters and other support systems is declining or shrinking, unfortunately, at a time when the need is greatest. And what we're seeing is that the gap between the danger and the risk and the harm, and the gap between that and support, is actually increasing. In an effort to try to anticipate these issues, in April, in my capacity as the OSCE Special Representative, I issued a set of recommendations to governments on how to start thinking about the problem and to address the consequences, especially as it relates to human trafficking victims and survivors. And let me just highlight a couple of the things that I talked about and urged governments to take action on, because I think they really relate to the conversation that you're going to have today on the Right Way project. First of all, I asked governments to look at establishing or strengthening hotlines related to human trafficking, domestic violence, and child abuse, and broadly promote their services as a tool for the identification of presumed cases. And actually, in Italy, there's some really good work being done around this work on the hotlines. Second, provide victims of trafficking with access to safe and immediate accommodation, healthcare, and psychological assistance to assist in their exit from trafficking and protect them from re-victimization. Temporary quarantine accommodation prior to shelter placement was identified as a promising practice. What we had seen is that efforts to accommodate victims were shrinking, and so victims were being left on their own, essentially, in these lockdowns, which was obviously very problematic. Third, extend protection and assistance measures for all victims of trafficking, including work permits and access to services. Sometimes countries have limits on the amount of time somebody can be in services, and we really think they need to extend that for the duration of the pandemic at a bare minimum, to ensure that the social inclusion process beyond the current health crisis is possible. Some of the really bad examples we've seen are where, for example, asylum seekers who are also victims of trafficking don't have access to work permits, and then their only option is to start to engage in the commercial sex industry, which of course leads quickly to exploitative situations. Next, we encourage countries to provide online support to victims of trafficking, inside and outside shelters, psychological counseling, and so forth, and to continue investment in rehabilitation programs. And this is really closely connected to the work that you're talking about. As the risk of losing survivors who are in transition is really particularly high right now due to the challenging economic situation. And finally, and this is hardly ever prioritized in government response systems, but we need to prioritize resources for exit services in high-risk sectors such as the prostitution industry. When commercial sex transactions were sort of artificially suppressed during the COVID, that puts a lot of people at even more sort of vulnerable situations, and that's the time when we should be offering support services and exit services, not just leaving people on their own. Just a few weeks ago, we convened a group of national coordinators from some 50 countries to talk about these recommendations and to urge them moving forward. And one thing that came out of that meeting was that there is a consensus among all of the national coordinators and the experts that this is not the time to turn away from trafficking. This is the time to invest. So I hope that this message is carried forward to all of you and your colleagues and to the government officials who are listening tonight, because this is really a difficult and precarious time, and it's time to look at trying to support and invest in this issue, not to turn away. So thanks very much for your attention. I applaud you on your project, and I hope you have a great discussion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Richey, for sharing these recommendations, which are so extremely urgent at this time, and particularly since it seems that we will be staying for a number of months to come in this situation. So I hope very much that in the questions and answers to you, we can still elaborate on what we all can do in this so important moment in time. I want to give the floor because I do not see any questions and answers for this moment. So I hope that you can bear with us for a later phase of questions and answers. Yeah, I don't see them in the chat. So I then would like to introduce Monsignor Robert Vitillo. Monsignor Vitillo is the Secretary General of ICMC, the International Catholic Migration Commission, and he has been so since 2016. In another capacity, he is also my boss based in Geneva, while I am based here at ICMC in Brussels. Monsignor Vitillo is a trained social worker and has a very broad experience in human trafficking. And I am very pleased that he will address some of the issues linked to integration of the victims of human trafficking, as highlighted in the Right Way Handbook. Monsignor Vitillo, the floor is yours.
Can you hear me? Yes, okay. Dear sisters and brothers, united in solidarity with migrants and refugees throughout the world, but most especially with the survivors of human trafficking. First of all, I wish to thank you for the honor and privilege to share these brief introductory remarks with you. As Secretary General of the International Catholic Migration Commission and a member of the Board of Directors of ICMC Europe, I'm humbled by the dedication and the passion of the Comunitas Papa Giovanni XXIII, which led and coordinated this inspiring initiative, and of all the others engaged organizations, including my esteemed ICMC Europe colleagues. Your quest for justice and inclusion is urgently needed in the midst of a world that too often closes in on itself. Indeed, negative migration and refugee policies and practices deprive our fellow citizens of the opportunities and the gifts which derive from the efforts that Pope Francis presents as 4 action verbs: to welcome, protect, promote, and integrate newcomers into our local and national communities. Integration is not something that I do for others. On the contrary, as you write, with much experience and wisdom, it is, and I quote, a dynamic two-way process involving adaptation and transition on the part of newcomers, individuals, and the wider society in which they are settling. You also point out so accurately that, I quote, different people integrate at different rates depending on pre and post migration experiences, individual capacities and vulnerabilities, and the extent to which receiving societies create enabling environments and support for integration. This insight is all the more true when integration involves survivors of human trafficking, because whose bodily, emotional, and spiritual integrity has been so deeply and inexcusably violated. While you have chosen to focus this handbook on the mutual interactions between helpers and Nigerian women survivors, I believe that your framework of the 4 phases of recovery and transition, which you identify as detection, restoration of rights, recovery, and autonomy, can be undertaken successfully with other survivors, not only of human trafficking, but also of other forms of violence and trauma encountered during their forced migration journeys, and all too often during equally difficult and abusive experiences in transit and destination countries or regions where they seek refuge as a result of internal displacement. Your framework for integrative services is most helpful, especially since it takes into account the wide range of physical, emotional, social, and spiritual needs that we all share, but also become much more acute when a person created in the image and likeness of God has been attacked at the very core of her being through the crime against humanity that is carried out by human traffickers. Many national and local authorities believe that trafficking survivors can be adequately served by the bureaucratic dispensing of economic aid, housing, and job placements. Not to downplay those necessary services, but I agree with you that, I quote, shadowing and support, mentoring, and introducing survivors into relational networks are even more essential resources to provide survivors with instruments and ways to interpret a new reality and build a different future, which they probably never dared to hope for in their lives. In part 2 of the handbook, you enter into a detailed description of the methods and processes that form the foundation of dedicated services for integration. I will not attempt to summarize them in the limited time allotted to me, but I do want to thank you for the detailed strategies that you provide in this section. I especially appreciated your insight that survivors need help to confront the challenges of acknowledging themselves as persons with resources, qualities, and abilities to be as well as to do. Indeed, it is only through such a person-focused approach that survivors can arrive at the profound lesson that being human means being for someone, and thus regain the capacity to build relationships of interpersonal trust with other significant persons in their lives. Your presentation of good practice models developed by various participant organizations engaged in this Right Way initiative are extremely informative. I think, however, the best way to conclude this introduction, and in effect to summarize your entire effort, is to listen carefully to the testimony of a young woman named Faith, bearer of a fittingly prophetic name, when she gave witness to the resilience and literal rebirth that she experienced through the help she received from caring people like all of you. And so I will quote her. "I made it. The greatest difficulty in my life has been to escape trafficking. Fortunately, I turned to an association which helps persons in difficulty like me, and I trusted them. With their help, I have found out that I am very good-natured and polite, as well as a caring mother. I dream of having a permanent job, of soon being able to live with my partner and my daughter. I have good manual skills, and I would like to become a seamstress. I want to do this for my daughter. I want her to study and grow up to be a free woman." Signed, Faith, age 24. God bless all of you on your journeys with women like Faith, who are rediscovering the loving and healing touch of God in their hearts and in their souls. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Monsignor Vitillo, for this very good overview and feedback on what we have learned both in practice in this handbook. I would like now that we go a bit more into depth about what these integration pathways really are enhancing, and I'm very happy to give the floor to my colleague Abigail Maristela. She is a graduate from Boston College for Social Work and has been with ICMC for the past 2 years, working on the pathways in detail, some comparative work. Abigail, yes, I'm happy that you have your video on. Then I will switch myself off. The floor is yours, Abigail.
Thanks, Petra. Thanks so much, Papi Giovanni organization, for having us here today and for leading this great project. My name is Abigail Maristela, like Petra said. I'm one of the researchers on the Right Way project with ICMC Europe. I'm going to start a PowerPoint now, but I just wanted you to see my video for a second. Please let me know if you're unable to see the PowerPoint at any time. So we've already spoken a lot about integration, and I think we all think integration is important. But one thing that I really want to kind of hone in on right at the beginning is that integration takes anti-trafficking work a step further. It takes prevention work a step further because it really gives somebody a chance at a new life. And something that's so remarkable about this is that it could have been a goal that somebody had in the past. For example, if somebody's goal is to work in France, for example, and they're from Nigeria, like the context that we're working in with the Right Way project, and then through kind of those avenues, they got coerced or introduced to the trafficking networks, being able to integrate then in France instead of being returned to Nigeria helps them to realize this goal. And I think that that's something that's really, really special. So as Bob mentioned, we see integration as a two-way process. So there's a lot of really difficult, meaningful work that survivors of trafficking are doing. And on the other side, there's a lot of work that the community also needs to be doing to create that environment that enables the survivors of trafficking to do the work they need to do in order to fully integrate. The pathway I'm about to show you next was created throughout our literature review process, desk research, interviews with so many organizations and survivors of trafficking in the 6 countries you see there, and just wanted to kind of give a little context to its creation. So here it's a little text heavy, but hopefully you can bear with me on this. You can see there's the 4 stages that Bob mentioned as well. So starting with detection and then ending in autonomy. And as he also mentioned, one of my favorite quotes from the handbook is essentially that this integration pathway is not one size fits all. You know, we have created this kind of as a guide because we need to have benchmarks, but no survivor of trafficking is going to hit all of these points. No community is going to as well, because it's always a different experience for each person. And what exactly are we looking at when we say that? Here we're looking at those key considerations in the green part of the wheel you're looking at right now. So for example, if you're working with a child survivor of trafficking, their age is obviously going to impact their housing options. If you're working with somebody who has experienced great trauma, as all survivors of trafficking have, how is that going to affect their accessing their rights, their ability to participate in legal processes that are needed? So those are all considerations that will shape the possibilities and outcomes of someone's pathway. But one I want to also pay attention to is empowerment. So we have these kind of dispositions, if you will, that may or may not change, but empowerment is really important. Survivors of trafficking need to have agency and control over what they do and how they do it. And in doing so, it gives them this sense of empowerment that they may not have had in the years of abuse and exploitation that they had at the hands of their traffickers. So in giving them this agency, it's really a healing practice in and of itself. I'm going to go back to the pathway just to mention a few different points. The first one is autonomy. So autonomy is obviously in our benchmarks the last phase, and that's because we're working in the European context. We're looking at integration within the EU, and so in that context, successful integration is full economic and social inclusion. However, as we just saw, culture and country of origin are one of the key considerations we need to be aware of. So we need to be open to what benchmarks might your clients have that are different than what we might have or what might be expected in the countries that they're integrating in, and be open to exploring those different pathways and also not reprimanding if they don't align. Now I'll just discuss 3 good practices. We actually collected 30 good practices throughout the entire project, and got to meet with some incredible organizations, some of which are here with us today at the webinar. So thank you for attending. And we'll start with our partner, Caritas Pescara Penne in Italy. At the detection phase, they work in reception centers to identify potential victims of trafficking. And I think that that's really important to see if we can meet somebody when they first arrive. We also know that asylum and the asylum process is often utilized by victims of trafficking and by trafficking networks. So this is a really important consideration. The second is Proyecto Esperanza in Spain, and they have this terrific 3 kind of tiered housing program. So this, if you're looking at our pathway, would kind of fit in between detection and restoration of rights, but also be continuous across all 4 stages. So what they have here is an emergency housing option, and then they have independent housing for, I think it's up to 8 months, and then a transfer housing where they live independently, live with some roommates. So they're really on their way to autonomy in that respect. And those decisions are made with their social workers and all of the other supportive services that the project offers. The last one I will discuss is Pagasa in Belgium, and they also offer so many different services, but one that's really important is their legal support. So what they'll do is meet with clients and determine what legal possibilities they have. Are you going to launch a trafficking investigation and try to get some support under the 2011 directive, or are you going to maybe pursue the asylum route? From there, they meet with the client from every step of the way, explain what's happening, why it's happening. Everything is translated, interpreted, back translated, which is really important if you want to have continuity of stories across the board. And then if there's a court procedure that needs to happen, they'll track the court dates, they'll prep clients, they'll attend the court hearings with them, and then based on the outcome, they'll either help them to either apply for residency or to see what their other options are. And the last thing that I'll say before we move on is that the amount of people who are able to receive residency based on being a survivor of human trafficking under the 2011 directive is astoundingly low. And we must do something to fix this, because if you're not able to receive residency, you may not be able to accomplish the tasks in the later phases of our integration pathway, because you just might not have access within that enabling environment that we talk about in the community side. So this is something that we as service providers need to really seriously look into. Government officials, who are we partnering with in law enforcement to facilitate this process and help survivors of trafficking access something that they rightfully have the right to. And I'll stop here. I won't go into good practices for the remaining portions of the pathway, because our future presenters are going to touch on those. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Abigail, for this I think quite interesting pathway overview that also is published on the website, and you can also find it in the integration handbook. For one reason or another, my video, and I knew that I should not have put it off, does not click. So, well, you have seen who I am. So I will try to fix it again. Without further delay, I would like to move on and introduce you to Marco Aliotta from Caritas Trieste, who has one of the partners in the Right Way project that has also been Caritas Trieste implementing one of the pilots. He will now translate from Italian into English the speech of Aldo Becce from Jonas Italia Association. Aldo is a psychologist, and he will underline the question of motherhood and the risk of their children to become invisible, especially when they move to another EU country. The floor is yours, Marco, and I see your camera is on, so I'm happy for that. Go ahead.
Okay, welcome, Aldo. Puoi iniziare.
Sono Aldo Becce, psicanalista, lavoro nella supervisione psicologica delle educatrici della Casa di Accoglienza alla Madre di Trieste per donne in difficoltà.
My name is Aldo Becce. I'm a psychologist and I work in psychological supervision together with social workers in the care house La Madre, the mother in Trieste, for women in need.
Negli ultimi anni molte donne provenienti dalla Nigeria, dopo aver ricevuto le cure della prima accoglienza, in tempi che sono sempre variabili, spariscono senza lasciare traccia. Sappiamo che finiscono nella prostituzione.
In the last year, most of the women that we welcome in our house comes from Nigeria. And after receiving the caring of the house in variable timing, they disappear without any traces. And we know that they are forced into prostitution.
In casa la madre si è ripetuto più volte questo meccanismo perverso. Prima accoglienza, permanenza in casa per un tempo variabile e sparizione successiva riapparizione come prostitute.
In our care house, the mother, this perverse mechanism repeated. At the beginning, there is the welcoming, then women stay in the house for a variable timing, and then they disappear. And in the last stage, they reappear as prostitutes.
Questo ha suscitato nelle educatrici una domanda etica pressante. Cosa stiamo facendo? Curando la prima accoglienza delle ragazze, stiamo involontariamente contribuendo al meccanismo della tratta?
This mechanism provokes in the social workers an urgent ethical question. What are we doing? Caring about the women, are we accidentally contributing to the mechanism of trafficking?
Bisogna sempre cogliere e accogliere la domanda etica dei soggetti, perché interrogano il senso di quello che stiamo facendo e come stiamo vivendo la nostra vita, il nostro lavoro.
As psychologists, we have to receive the ethical question coming from the people, because it's about the meaning of what we are doing, and it's about the meaning of how we are living our life.
Ed eravamo sulle tracce di questa domanda etica quando è sparito Obadiah e la sua madre. Lui ha svelato una trama rimossa, una verità tanto evidente quanto negata. Non solo sparivano le madri, sparivano anche i figli. La domanda adesso era, mentre la madre fa la prostituta, dove è Obadiah? Con chi è Obadiah? Nella tratta si fa sempre riferimento alle donne coinvolte, ma non si parla di figli. Perché non sono visti questi bambini? Quale meccanismo li fa sparire dalla coscienza sociale?
And when we were on the traces of this ethical question, together with the social workers of the house, something happened. Obadiah disappeared with his mother. He unveiled a removed plot, a evident and denied truth. It was not only about the disappearance of women, but also the disappearance of children. So the ethical question now is, or was, when the mothers were forced to prostitution, where is Obadiah? Who is caring about Obadiah? In the trafficking, we always focus on women involved, but we never talk about children. Why these children are not seen? What kind of mechanism make them disappear from the social consciousness?
Questo meccanismo psichico-sociale è quello della rimozione, come lo spiega Sigmund Freud. La rimozione permette alla coscienza di difendersi di un pensiero doloroso e intollerabile.
This mechanism, the psychological mechanism, it's what we call, Freud called removal or repression. And the repression allows consciousness to spread a painful thought.
Quale sarebbe questo pensiero intollerabile? Che questi bambini siano coinvolti nella prostituzione infantile o nel traffico d'organi.
What is this painful thought? That these children are involved in children prostitution or in trafficking of organs.
Quindi l'immagine impossibile dello spianto di un organo di questo bambino, la pedofilia, vengono cancellate.
So the impossible image of organ explant of these children or pedophilia are deleted.
Sono bambini invisibili, trasformati in desaparecidos. Noi affermiamo che ogni piccolo bambino nigeriano in comunità di accoglienza è a rischio, perché le comunità trattengono merce che appartiene alla mafia, le donne e i loro figli.
These are invisible children, transformed into desaparecidos. We affirm that every single Nigerian child in our community is at risk because communities hold goods belonging to mafia.
Abbiamo trattato il trauma di questa rimozione con lo svelamento.
We treated the trauma of this removal with the unveiling.
Coinvolgendo il Tribunale per i minorenni di Trieste, i Carabinieri, il Servizio Sociale.
And we did this involving the Court for Minors in Trieste, Police and Social Service.
Stiamo creando un'anagrafe dei bambini desaparecidos in tutte le comunità.
And we want to have traces of these disappeared children.
Abbiamo intensificato i progetti di inserimento lavorativo di queste donne. Abbiamo fatto una mostra di fotografia dell'invisibile in Italy.
So we intensified the project for work inclusion and so to promote the autonomy of this woman, but also we made a photo exhibition talking about these invisible children in a shopping mall, an important shopping mall in Trieste.
Brucia sempre come un fuoco la domanda etica degli educatori: cosa stiamo facendo? Come fare per non trasformarci in complici della mafia?
The ethical question of social workers always burns like fire. What we are doing? How we can do not to be transformed into accomplices of Nigerian mafia?
A casa da madre abbiamo trovato questa risposta: creare assieme, inventare nuovi progetti, trasformare il buio in luce.
At Care House La Madre, we found this answer. Create together new projects to transform the darkness into light.
Lo facciamo per le mamme, per i loro figli, lo facciamo per le educatrici stesse esposte al trauma della partenza, per curare a chi se ne prende cura. Grazie.
And we do this to care about the mothers and their children. We do for the social workers that are exposed to the trauma of departure to heal, who cares about these women and children. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Many thanks for this intervention. And I just see there is a question now coming for Mr. Richey. And I don't know, are you listening? Because I tried via the chat.
I am listening, yes.
Wonderful. I think that this was a very powerful intervention. And I see that there is a big preoccupation in Italy on the protection of surviving mothers that are deported from the north to the south of Europe and to Italy. How could we ensure more help, especially for their children?
It's for Aldo Becce, right?
No. It was. I heard that this one was for you, as a matter of fact, or is it for Aldo? It says in the chat it's too Valiant.
Mi traduci? Mi traduci, Marco?
I can see the question. So I think this is about how we can take care of these women that from the north of Europe are deported, let's say, to the south, right? Ok, come possiamo fare per prenderci cura di queste donne che spesso anche dal nord d'Europa sono deportate nel sud e quindi anche in Italia? Quindi come prenderci cura di loro e dei loro bambini?
Intensificando tutti i progetti di integrazione, di inserimento. Noi stiamo lavorando anche in Casa da Madre con delle famiglie che tentano di fare accoglienza e inventando continuamente progetti, cioè rispondere al colpo del trauma con la creazione. Questo è... Sì, vai.
First of all, it's very important to have inclusion projects, for social inclusion projects, work inclusion projects, and so we are working to create different pathways in this way. And what is important is also to rebuild or build a social network. And in Casa La Madre, we are working with families that together with women and children, together they walk this pathway. And the response to the trauma is the creativity.
Yes, yeah, I don't see I have other questions now in the chat. So then I would like to give the floor to our wonderful Sara Zanni from Papa Giovanni, and she will give a presentation on a part of the handbook relating to the strategies for integration, and particularly on vocational training and internship. Sara, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Petra. Yes, thank you also to Abigail that before me already introduced with an image very clear our effort in the integration pathway with these women. If Alessandro helped me, I also want to share a picture with you to focus on key elements on which we have built this independent life project with our women. We can start from an element that is very important for us, for APG 23, that is the relationship with a person of trust. A person which helps the survivor to discover herself as a person, with qualities, dreams, and wishes. Is really a constant mentoring process through supportive action, active listening, to allow the survivor to overcome her traumas in a non-judgmental setting. This person, of course, the person of trust, needs cultural competencies, and he or she has to be aware of the dynamic of human trafficking, including the vulnerabilities it may bring and the complexity of hindrances the survivors encounter. So keep an intercultural, person-centered approach is essential. Staff, volunteers, they have to manage their personal emotion, overcoming their prejudice and stereotypes. They need to practice empathy, looking to these women as someone unique and positive. In this framework, we create a lot of opportunities, as you already told, especially about vocational training and internship. And these are very important opportunities, because only through work and economic independence we can guarantee a complete recovery. And Irene, later after me, will explain better through an interview to a very special person. The last thing that I want to share with you is the importance of the awareness-raising activities on local communities, with a special focus on youth. We cannot ignore that it is a fundamental challenge to make people aware that buying the so-called sex services is a serious offense against human dignity and human integrity, and is deeply linked to gender inequality in our society, because it has an impact on the perception of mutual relation and sexuality among men and women. So awareness campaign on the responsibility of the demand side of human trafficking should be promoted. To make sure that survivors' dignity is restored, we must make sure that they no longer feel like bodies for sale. Now, Alessandro, can you come back to the camera? Because I leave the floor to Irene, Irene Ciambezi, coordinator and expert of our anti-trafficking service. Thank you, Irene.
Thank you, Sara. This key element of Right Way project and what we wrote in our handbook, Opportunities and Challenges, edited by all partners, are not abstract words. They come up from many faces, many stories, many smiles, and especially many tears of young women who live in our families and family home 24 hours a day. In this pandemic, they suffer and hope with us. All these women from 17 to 24 years old know that many other women still suffer out there on the street, and a lot of people in indoor prostitution, in apartments as brothels, were exploited in front of a webcam. In Italy, during our street team work, we meet all these women, not only from Nigeria, also from Cote d'Ivoire, from Bulgaria, Romania and Albania, and also from Venezuela, Peru, Brazil. They are forced to think themselves only as a body, because exploiters, madam, sex buyers see them only as bodies, not human beings. They repeat us, not enough, a masked angel. speaking about coronavirus diffusion. So what can we do to change this? Every person has a dream, said our founder, Father Ciambezi. Every person is a being, for he has realized to be in relationship with someone. To satisfy this way of being is indispensable that someone looks at you. Everybody worth much more than just his body. That's why we try to build relationships of trust. Especially in this health emergency, everybody needs a person of trust to overcome fear. This is even more true if you are a survivor of trafficking who has suffered trauma before leaving, during the journey when you arrived in Europe in the prostitution industry. Like it happened to Joy, who today works in the leather workshop in Florence, promoted by our community. Here, a group of survivors learn the different phases of leather production and how to create bags and accessorize. This training has been organized in cooperation with the teachers and students of Academy of Belle Arts of Florence and with an important leather company, Jacobella. The whole of society is responsible for this fight against trafficking. Many actors are involved in the integration pathway of these women. Joy is a true witness of sexual trafficking and a true witness of the importance of an holistic recovery path. I don't know if she's here. Joy, are you here with us? Joy?
Yes, Irene, I'm here.
Okay. Welcome in our webinar, Joy.
Thank you.
Some question about your story. When you left your country, when you left Nigeria, what was your dream for your future and for your family, Joy?
Okay, when I left Nigeria, my dream is to find a good work, to work and to help my family, because I'm the first child of my family and we are 7 in numbers. I have 3 younger sisters and my father and mother.
Yes. And while you were suffering during your trip in Libya and when you entered in Italy in the street prostitution, what were you hoping for? What did you think, Joy? Were you afraid, I think, of your madam?
Yes, when I was in the street, when I was doing prostitution, because I don't like the job, because of I took a oath in Nigeria that if I don't work, they might kill me. So I was scared. So that was the reason why I'm into prostitution. And that day I do pray that God will help me and God will also send a helper that will help me.
We can
To
imagine.
become a better person, to stop the prostitution.
Yes. Then you met Sylvia, a social worker of our community, Pope John 23rd, who told you that you can escape. You decided with courage to change your life and not be exploited anymore. You were welcomed by an Italian family in Florence, where you live. So who helped you in this year? Who gave you psychosocial support for your vocational training, your internship, and now for your day job with the leather bags?
Okay, I work with another skin, and Alessandro is the boss who we are working for. Then with the help of his mother, Martha. So she have been doing this work for 50 years, I think 50 years. So she have more experience. So she's the one teaching us how to work, how to sew the bag, how to join the bag together, to paint with the colors. and everything.
Yes, good. What do you like in your work? What are your abilities?
My ability is to work. Like, I like many things in the work, so I do half of the things in the work. Like Potakiavi, I do join them together. Then I do paint with different colors and Potakiavi wallet in English is wallet.
Okay. So you are precise. Joy, what do you wish to the young women who are still in the prostitution industry, risking even with coronavirus?
Okay. I just hope they should see, because in Italy here, Nigeria, we don't have people that will help us because our family is not here, and the only people that do help is Papa Giovanni. They do go to streets to help people that don't have home, people that don't have job and everything. Example, me, they're the people that helped me, that gave me a better life. Example, the work, and I do go to school. So I just pray they should help them the way they did for me.
Thank you, Joy. All our partners who are spending their lives to give a good future to the survivors. Later you can continue. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Yes, thank you so much for this great account of the work you're doing here on the ground, and for Joy for sharing these experiences. We are becoming now, unfortunately, a bit pressured for time. And again, for one reason or another, my video is not working. I really would like to give the floor now to Geneviève Colas, who is one of the most known experts in human trafficking in Europe. Bonjour Geneviève, je suis très contente de te voir. Comment tu vas?
Très bien.
Tell me about the great work you do with building the networks in France, because I think that this is a story to be told.
For us, what is important is that in Europe, different components of civil society, association, trade union, business, are mobilized to prevent and fight against trafficking human beings in all forms: sexual exploitation, domestic slavery, forced labor, forced to commit crime, forced marriage. And it's important for us to say that it's not only one form of traffic, but different form. Secours Catholique Caritas France is the coordinator of a collective together against trafficking human beings in France, and it's 28 NGOs who are interested in all victims, whatever the form of exploitation and whatever their country of origin. According to national statistics, 3,000 victims of trafficking accompanied by association in 2018 come from 79 different countries. 3 out of 4 victims were women, 1 out of 4 was a child, and almost half of the victims were from Nigeria. So we felt it was important to study this issue more closely. We work for this with different NGOs in France who can work with this public. These guidelines set on the integration of Nigerian women survivors of trafficking for sexual exploitation, from rehabilitation to autonomy, are enriched by concrete initiatives in the field of psychological assistance, employment, shelter, and housing, showing the need for a comprehensive support of trafficked persons. It shows the importance for effective assistance of knowing the context of origin of trafficked persons, and therefore, as far as foreigners are concerned, the need to know the situation in their own country, here in Nigeria. This work is a result of long-term fieldwork with trafficked persons and many experienced volunteers and professionals on the subject. It is based on many years of experience because everyone knows that it is not easy to discuss the issue of trafficking for sexual exploitation with trafficked persons when they are marked by sexual violence and not its consequence of their physical and psychological health. The majority of them see no alternative, live in a state of post-traumatic stress and are under the influence of a pimp, which prevents them from escaping. The victims at the beginning have difficulty talking about their situation. They keep silent to protect themselves from the shame of being sent back to them, to protect themselves from the violence of their history, because they are not aware that they are victims or because they think that they cannot be helped. We have to break the taboo of the subject because keeping silent, pretending not to know, or showing embarrassment would send back to the person the idea that they are doing is shameful and that what is happening to them is their fault. Talking about and with victims is opening a dialogue rather than maintaining a taboo. In Secours Catholique Caritas France, with this collective, Together Against Trafficking in Human Beings, we have a website with many examples of what we can do as victim of trafficking in human beings or with people who are victims of trafficking in human beings. The good practice proposed in the book, experimented by associations in different European countries, are not so much model to be copied as initiatives that lead to reflection for an original action corresponding to the needs identified in each field. It's very important for me because we have some example, but in each country, the situation is different. With people, it's different. And it's very important that we are creative to continue and to adapt our work in the new situation of COVID-19. Thank you very much.
Yes. Thanks a million. And I think the Contre la Traite réseau is a very inspiring one. Yes. And I know how much work you put in that, because it's good to start a network, but then maintaining it is a constant struggle.
Yes.
Now, and I see we're pressured for time already. Maria, Luisa Puglisi, are you putting on your camera?
Yes.
Yeah, wonderful. Very happy to hear you talk about your network, Maria, Talita Cum, and talk a bit about El Contexto Español, the Spanish context. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. I will be rushing because of the time. And well, I'm Luisa. I'm a sister of the Congregation Sister Adorers of Blessed Sacrament and Charity. I'm Italian based in Spain now. My speech will be a quick overview of our networking, especially with Talita Cum International Committee, because you know that the Committee of the Church is coming from USIG, and then with Talita Cum International, which works as a network around the world in the 5 continents. And here, especially in Europe, our network is a religion network called Renate, and we are working in 27 countries. Most of us, we are not all religious sisters, but because there are also men, but also lots of lay people involved, because as we all know, and we have already said in this webinar, that this is a joint work altogether. Well, to be very short, just to underline that, according to our report in the 2020, for instance, most of our work was direct action and prevention, and then capacity building, and then advocacy and lobbying, and finally research and development. which means that we are really very involved in and on the daily life and daily basis of the women, but not also only this, because we in different countries and here in Spain, where I'm based, we have strict teamwork. We have shelters. We work as we said in these houses of semi or autonomy of the women, and then we work very hard for awareness, advocacy. But I would share with you, because we are coming from different countries, but there's always one call, which could be the call of the gospel with my brother or with my sister, as we have already seen in the last Fratelli Tutti, no? That today, as in the past, slavery is rooted in no notion of the human person that allow him or her to be treated as an object. Fratelli Tutti 24. So this is could be even our starting point for our daily work, because human trafficking through collaborative initiative focus around prevention, protection, social reintegration, and rehabilitation of survivors, partnership and advocacy, promoting actions that affect the systemic causes. Because we are aware that we have to risk going to the other house, in the other land, to a different reality. The reality of trafficked women and girls confront us with the suffering of exploitation, violence, anonymity, indifference, lack of rights. Because we knew it, but especially in this last year, where the COVID, we struggled all over the world with this, but welcome care recognitions. I think there are 3 words that can be just around us and has to be with us on daily basis. Because I'm living in a shelter, and during the worst time of pandemic, women coming from different situations of exploitation, confinement, and suddenly they were confined again, because those who cannot move were not free to move. Then suddenly again locked in the house, where everything was closed, where the bureaucracy, and we all know the time of bureaucracy, lack of documentation, lack of paper, the uncertain future was there. So we need to give them hope, but mainly we need to have hope, because we need to help them to struggle for a life, although in this situation. And, as we have already said, those women coming from very far from Spain, for instance, and worried about the situation in their own countries, worried about everything, and that it is in a daily life, we face it. But in this situation of pandemic, it's getting worse and worse. And also we saw a great increase of demanding for girls coming in the shelters, because of course the situation they couldn't work, as we say it work, they couldn't be free, so they need a safe place where to stay, where sanitary conditions help them to overcome the worst time that we were living. So I would like to say that we need to, as a church around the world and here around Europe, we really worked hard as a network, because it's very interesting for us to share even our experience, to see how in different countries the work is different, but we have something in common. We have some way a path to follow, and we always have the hope that give us strength on daily basis. So I would like to share that freedom for them, for the women that we all have, and the freedom that we need to give them is to incarnate ourselves in the reality of the other for equality and respect, because we all live in a unique land. We are not different, although we are coming from different parts of the world. So also I would like to share with you that the profile of beneficiaries along this time, the majority were women, but in different countries, following from refugees, migrants, and non-national regardless of their gender. And mainly they need for a short-term accommodation, then self-care supplies, meal and food packages, clothing supplies. This is what around Europe we are doing all over this year. So it's true that the situation is getting worse, And also, as we have already said, even the psychological social services are increasing their work because the mental disease, I would say, or the mental the situation is getting worse and worse. So women need a place where they can feel free, where they can live as they are, whatever happens. So I would just remark that as a network, we need to work together around the world and around Europe. And here we are here working. And this handbook is a good tools of networking, because we are different associations, different from different part of Europe, but also with different points of view. But we are still there all together to work for the human rights and for these women, for children in this case also. 5 minutes.
Yes, Maria, thank you so much for this important contribution. And I think we already started with Valiant Richey talking about how urgent the situation has become with COVID-19, and the further need to be even more closely allied to find responses. And not only at our own national levels, but also at European levels. So I'm even more happy that we have with us our Member of Parliament, Isabella Adinolfi. Are you online now? Can we see you? Yes,
okay,
welcome.
perfect.
Welcome, Isabella.
Thank you so much. Merci, Madame Petra. And thank you for all. I want to say goodbye, merci to all, and especially I want to thanks to Comunità Papa Giovanni XXIII to me. So, European Parliament. I think it's very similar to the threshold of 2021, and it's very crimes against people in Europe. Trafficking is a serious crime prohibited fundamental rights. Although Europe is a continent where many rights are guaranteed, there are still battles that we have not won. And it's important to continue to talking about them and raising public awareness, as, for example, we have done here in Brussels in the European Parliament with Donato Bonaiuto just before the outbreak of the pandemic. A few days ago, to the end of October, the third report on the progress made by fighting against trafficking in human beings was presented as required by the Directive on Preventing and Combating Trafficking in Human Beings. The report was made and collected the data of the European Commission, European Parliament, all the member states, and all the agencies of the European Union, like Europol. I would to comment it. Trafficking continues to be a highlight profitable crime that brings huge profit to the criminals. And the estimated global annual profit from trafficking amounts at 29 billion of euro, but maybe the number are higher. The top 5 EU countries as regards citizenship of trafficking victims by absolute numbers were Romania, Hungary, France, Netherlands, and Bulgaria. The top 5 not EU countries as regards citizenship of trafficking victims in the EU were Nigeria, China, Ukraine, Morocco, and India. Sexual exploitation continues to be the most prevalent purpose behind trafficking in the EU, and 3/4 of all victims were female. During the COVID-19 pandemic, criminals have to generate significant profit and intensify criminal activities. And Europol, the agency of law enforcement and cooperation, warns that trafficking in human beings is likely to increase in the wake of the economic downturn. Besides the traditional fields of exploitation like prostitution, theft, taxi, and agricultural sector, there are the new sector as construction, tourism, catering, nursing, and domestic services. And of course, the class has cheap labor. So, what could be the solution? Fighting is a phenomenon. This phenomenon is not easy. We are faced with well-articulated criminal organization. Trafficking networks are increasing, showing higher levels of professionalism and expertise. Organized crime groups involved in trafficking in human beings have well-structured criminal networks, are operating internationally, in some cases with a pool of trans-border facilitators and specialized groups. The increased misuse of information technology by criminals present a concern and a challenge to authorities tackling trafficking in human beings. Europol highlighted that links between trafficking and other crimes in this context of migration. For example, Nigeria network significantly influence the criminal landscape in the EU by regularly cooperating with local criminal groups in carrying out other forms of organized crime. Many suspects involved in trafficking in human beings hold legal residence permits, are country asylum applicants, or have refugees status. Personally, I consider that the focus on trafficking for sexual exploitation in EU is not sufficient. I am convinced that not all EU member states have the same aim to fight this phenomenon. And indeed, because half of the victims of traffic are citizens of from EU, in some countries, the prostitution is legalized. And in this country, in these member states, the trafficker transferred part of their victims because minor control. Furthermore, not all member states of the European Union have signed the Istanbul Convention. The European institution does not seem interested in talking about prostitution, and the reason is quite simple. It's quite simple because, for example, Holland, Germany, Belgium, the prostitution is legalized, and instead of fighting the social problem, people prefer to profit from it. But if we don't combat the trafficking, and for combat the trafficking, it's necessary to intervene above all the requests. If you increase the demand, or you increase also the offer. It's not me that I say, but it's Europol that say it. So there is a strategy, the EU Gender Equality Strategy for the 2020-25. And it presents policy, objective and action of ending all the violence against women. The EU accession or Council in the Europe Convention on Preventing and Combating Violence Against Women and Domestic Violence remain a key priority for the European Commission. If it should remain blocked, the European Commission will propose measures to obtain exactly the same objective of the Istanbul Convention. 1 month ago, on 16 September 2020, President von der Leyen announced that the European Commission intends to issue a legislative proposal to prevent and combat specifically all the forms of gender-based violence. The legislative initiative will have the same objective of the Convention, ensuring that EU member states have effective measures in place, of course, in area of the EU competence, to prevent and combat all the violence against women. Although some EU member states have enforced the registration, and also if the police reports are increased, the number of convicted traffickers remains low, really low. For example, in 2019 was just 825 arrested. It's ridiculous. And but I think that the human trafficking networks are often linked with other forms of criminality. For example, drug trafficking, extortion, money laundering, document fraud, or payment card fraud. So I think that the penalties and investigation of these crimes need to be increased in order to target and destroy criminal organizations. At the same time, support for the victim is essential. Without a good physiological training support in order to be economically independent, these people will not be able to consider it free. It's a moment of pandemic. The economic and human force are unfortunately limited. So, in my opinion, it's also essential to support an information operation in the countries of origin, to warn potential victims, to show, even if in a crude way, what happens. Unfortunately, all the indicators tell us that despite knowing the phenomenon, we are unable to intervene. And every day, dozens of human beings are sold to be enslaved or killed. Preventing human trafficking must be the
Isabella, thank you for this extremely powerful overview of all the different actions that will be coming up at European Union level. And I hope very much also that we will find very quickly a way out of this problematic situation with respect to the financial instruments, of course, too, so that we can move on to all these plans. Thank you so much for your intervention, and we will be in touch. And I will be happy to send you from Brussels here a number of copies of the handbook, so you can make that part of your further work. Thank you so much. We are a little bit over time, but last but not least, as we always say, José Luis.
Thank you.
We are very happy, José Luis Bazan from Comece, to give you the difficult task to do a wrap up and make some conclusions of what we have heard today.
Well, thank you very much, Petra, and thank you very much, of course, to the organizers, to the speakers. Some of you are very well known by me as well. We met several times on this particular issue. I think that I will use just 1 minute to explain also the Comece work on this matter. Comece, as you probably know, is the Commission of Catholic Bishops' Conferences of the EU. I am part of the staff member. I'm a legal advisor for migration, asylum, and freedom of religion. And I can tell you that the bishops are very aware of this problem, very concerned, and they have really of Comece in the work, in the advocacy work we do in Brussels. There was a plenary session of the bishops with the victim of trafficking, with inspectors from the London Metropolitan Police, the unit that works in anti-trafficking work, even the Inspector Highlander that became afterwards the UK Authority on Anti-Trafficking. We have had several dialogue seminars with the European Commission, photo exhibitions. Last year, we have 2 events at the European Parliament, co-organized with Don Bosco International, one on February, with a victim from Sierra Leone, a lady, Augusta, who unfortunately died recently, a very young lady. And in December, commemorating the 5th anniversary of the Joint Declaration of Religious Leaders Against Modern Slavery, which is a piece of the Catholic in terms of interreligious work in this regard. As well, I want to mention the pastoral guidelines of the Holy See, on the migration section of the Holy See on human trafficking, and we participate on that drafting process. So, having said that, of course, I'm incapable to summarize what you all have said, not only because of the number of speakers, but mostly because it is difficult to cut the richness of your interventions. But I would like to emphasize some of the points that attract my attention when you were speaking about this problem in crime. First, the question of the disproportionate impact of COVID against victims or survivors of trafficking human beings. And as well, the lack or the decrease in support in the systems on accommodations, psychological systems, and the need to invest time and resources in the fight against trafficking. So it's not just a cost, it's a social investment. Of course, I'm very grateful to see the great work done with this project, the outcome and the follow-up that I'm sure that it will come. It will enrich our work, advocacy work, and I'm sure that it will be interesting to combine these two elements, the political, legal dimension, and as well the experience. So it was a good idea also to bring the witness of one of the survivors of this crime. The importance of integration of victims, it was said by Abigail Maristela. I think it's a very important issue, to bring agency and control to those, in this case, the women who are victims of trafficking. This is something needed. The projects that she mentioned are just projects that, I think that they show not only the importance, but the success. So it's something that, of course, is a big fight, but there are good stories and there are good success. It's something worthy, not only in terms of personal investment, but also in terms of policy investment. It was mentioned also the experience of a care house in which children of prostitutes are invisible, and how we can deal with that, responding with creativity to this traumatic situation. The importance of personal trust that Irene and Sara were mentioning. The importance of this mentoring process is a process. It's not just one shot. It can take years even, to become an active, autonomous person after this reestablishment, psychological support, the reestablishment of rights, and so on. This process that it was mentioned and commented also by Monsignor Vitillo. I would like also to bring the attention to the importance that it was, of course, highlighted by Geneviève on the networking. So it's a matter of all actors. It's not just a matter of politicians or police or of social workers. It's a matter of all society, business, trade unions, entrepreneurs, churches, NGOs, of course, but anyone, any single person should be aware of this problem and also be helpful in detecting. I think that this is a very important moment, the detection, of course, prevention, but once it happens, detection can stop the process of criminals abusing women in this case. The importance of networking. It cannot be done isolated by anyone. I think that not only national or regional or local, but transnational, European, and even beyond. We all know, because the MEP mentioned the countries where women are coming from: Nigeria, China, Ukraine, Morocco. We all know as well that they're from the EU. As far as I know, the report of the EU trafficking, the European Commission mentions that most of women which are victims of sexual exploitation are from the EU, from Romania, Bulgaria, and other countries. And there is an intra-EU problem there, not only gangs that bring women from outside, but also internally, let's say, using or misusing the right to move internally without any border. Another element I want to bring is that Geneviève mentioned that violence is not an option. The question is that we have to, this is an invisible reality that maybe is closer than we think. We think that it may happen far away, but it may happen in our neighborhood. So it's something that we should look at, and we have to be instrumental. We have to be aware of that and be instrumental, just to to help those who decide to detect, and of course to be open to support even individually in our communities, persons, women, children, or overmade people when it comes to labor exploitation, for example. Maria Luisa Puglisi mentioned a very important, interesting thing about the work, and this is a very good example, the Renate network, in which everyone can be committed, either religious persons, lay people, male, female, and this is very important issue as the victims are right now also looking for safe places. And only communities can create safe places. It's not just a matter of individuals, but also to create not only housing, emergency housing. It was also mentioned the importance of emergency housing because of the COVID-19 and the difficulties to, I think it was work between brackets, you know. So when they cannot do, let's say, the activity, the procedures, they are looking for a safe place. And finally, I'm running, I know, Petra, and maybe it's too much in very short time, but I want also to respect a little bit the time that you gave to me. And finally, the MEP mentioned, of course, the EU framework on trafficking human beings, the direct anti-trafficking directive, the action plan. There are other, of course, elements, and as well the dimension of the national strategies, because of course implementation of the directive is in hands of the national authorities. The legal regimes are very different. You know, she mentioned Germany and other countries, and of course this is a, let's say, a problem because there is no unified position. In some countries like Belgium or Germany, they're legal, in others not so legal. In some countries they have legislations to attack the demand, in others they don't have. But also there is international instruments like she mentioned the Istanbul Convention. I think that with all these elements, we can keep on not only our reflection and awareness to extend the idea that this is a very profitable crime as well. That is interlinked to other crimes like drugs or smuggling of guns, because criminal gangs do not only touch one single item when it comes to smuggling, but they just use anything, that they touch anything that can be profitable. So I would like to thank all the speakers, the participants, of course, Petra, as a moderator. You have done a very good job. And I think that I will just shut up right now, not to undermine your good moderation. And thank you. Thank you all.
Yes, and it's always like that. And thank you very much, José Luis, because I think you did a fantastic wrap up of all the things that have been said, and the discussions were extremely rich. We could have had a conference for much longer because there are so many different elements. I would like to thank, of course, all the participants and first of all the speakers that have done a great job, and we thank you very much for your time and efforts. And of course, a personal note for our wonderful colleagues from Papa Giovanni, who have been coordinating the Right Way program the last 2 years, that have been relentlessly coordinating and implementing all the activities. There is a whole list of questions in the chat box. I made a copy and paste. And we will follow up with all the people that have registered for the conference and still share the resources that were put into the chat. So I think it's a bit late. So thank you very much. And I hope very much that we will meet again in live when the pandemic will have been left behind us. And we wish you a very good evening, a wonderful week, and stay safe and healthy, and keep doing your fantastic work with all the people you're serving. And we are very grateful for all your work and enormous commitment. Have a very nice evening. Just to ask, Sarah, did you still want to say a final thing?
No, thank you, Petra. Only final greetings to everyone, and good evening to everyone. Thank you. Tomorrow we will send to our registered participant all the materials by email, so don't worry. And thank you for all the contribution.
Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
And stay safe and healthy.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, bye.
Bye.
Thank you all. Thank you. Bye.